Hello everyone, this is Remlace from 40k Theories, and welcome to this new episode of 40k Lore for Newcomers. For this episode, nominated on Patreon by The Evil Scotsman, we will be taking a brief look at the Death Korps of Krieg regiments of the Astra Militarum. This video will be a brief overview for certain events that may be explored in greater depth within additional videos in the future. So without further ado, let's begin.
We're the Death Korps of Krieg, son. Did you think that was just a pretty name? We never retreat. We fight and we die. That's the Krieg way.
Originating from the irradiated world of Krieg, the Death Korps are Astra Militarum regiments whose warriors are noted for their grim stoicism and somewhat fatalistic, near-suicidal outlook. The Kriegers believe that their sole purpose in life is to fight and die in service to the Emperor of mankind, so as to atone for the sin of their world being disloyal to the Imperium. As a result of this need to redeem both themselves and their homeworld for such transgressions, Death Korps regiments will routinely be dispatched to the most dangerous and inhospitable war zones across the galaxy. The soldiers of the Death Korps hold no fear of death, making them the perfect soldiers to hold the line against the enemy, even in the most hopeless of situations. Each and every member of the Death Korps is a highly trained, self-sufficient and exceptionally disciplined soldier. They are masters of both siege and attrition warfare, who will often enact a slow yet relentless advance upon their foes, subjecting them to a concentrated artillery bombardment whilst ignoring any casualties that they may themselves suffer as a result of this tactic. The intensive volleys of las fire unleashed by the soldiers of the Death Korps, combined with their eagerness to die in service to the Emperor, make these regiments a terrifying prospect to face upon the battlefield.
Infantry win firefights, tanks win battles, artillery wins wars.
The events that led to the formation of the modern-day Death Korps can be traced back to the early years of M40. The world of Krieg was once a thriving and affluent hive world that boasted a thriving industrial-based economy. This world was ruled over by a council of autocrats that, over time, not only grew more debauched and self-indulgent, but also increasingly paranoid, believing that the Administratum would eventually usurp the power that they held. Tensions would continue increasing between the two groups until finally, in 433 M40, the High Autocrat of Krieg seceded from the Imperium, declaring that Krieg would be an independent world. This would lead to the onset of a civil war between the Separatists and those who remained loyal to the Imperium. The Separatists would swiftly capture many strategically vital locations upon the world, and would assume control over most of Krieg, although some locations, most notably that of High Ferrograd, would remain firmly in Loyalist hands. Despite learning that they would receive no reinforcements from the Imperium, the Loyalist Krieg forces were given strict orders to keep Krieg out of enemy hands at any cost. The Loyalist commander, Colonel Yerton of the Krieg 83rd Regiment, would then famously declare that if Krieg could not belong to the Emperor, then it would belong to nobody. Yerton would order for the world to be subjected to a continued nuclear bombardment, scouring the surface of Krieg with atomic fire that lasted for several days. This bombardment would cause a total collapse of the world's ecosystem and subsequently the onset of a nuclear winter, transforming the once verdant world into a radioactive wasteland. This event would become known within Imperial records as the Purging. Those who survived the initial bombardments would be forced to take shelter within subterranean bunkers due to the radiation and fallout. Over the next 500 years, Loyalist forces would continue to battle fiercely against the Separatists, gradually beginning to retake their world, and Krieg would officially be brought back into the Imperial fold during 949 M40. The Departmentum Unitorum, the branch of the administratum tasked with overseeing the Astra Militarum, would discover that, as a result of this civil war, the world had fallen drastically behind in submitting its tithes for the Imperial Guard. In response, Krieg officials would present the Munitorum with 20 fully raised regiments of Guardsmen, which were ready for immediate deployment. These regiments, in recognition for their actions during the Krieg Civil War, would henceforth become known throughout the Imperium as the Death Korps of Krieg.
For every one of us who falls, 10 more will take his place.
Due to being founded upon a world that is now little more than an irradiated wasteland, the Death Korps have become experts in operating within the most hazardous and toxic of environments. This is thanks in part to the trademark 3-piece respirator unit worn by each and every Death Korps soldier. The respirators of the Death Korps not only provide purified air for the soldiers to breathe, but also administer various antitoxins in either gas or liquid form to help prevent the soldiers from suffering various ailments such as radiation sickness. While comparatively new by the standards of other Imperial Guard regiments, the Death Korps have proven to be a tenacious and unrelenting force within numerous theatres of war, claiming countless victories for the Imperium in spite of their relatively short existence. Such campaigns would see the Death Korps battle against Xenos and heretical forces alike in conflicts such as the Siege of Vrax, the Orphean War, and the Battle of Tarsus Ultra. But one of the most notorious campaigns conducted by the Death Korps, however, would be that of the Siege of Durundii during late M41. When the hive world of Durundii began to refuse paying their tithes to the Imperium, the Administratum would dispatch a number of officials to the world in order to determine the reason why. Many of these investigators, however, would ultimately be captured and summarily hanged by a lynch mob. In response to this, the Adeptus Terra dispatched several Death Korps regiments to the world in order to pacify the Durundians. The Death Korps would deploy the bulk of their forces within the mountain ranges that overlooked the world's capital hive city, and would begin to unleash a devastating and unrelenting barrage of artillery. Many Durundian forces attempted to escape from the hive, but they would be swiftly gunned down by the besieging Imperial forces. The Death Korps would continue their bombardment for many long years. After 5 years of this relentless assault, the Durundians surrendered unconditionally to the Imperium, but their pleas for mercy would be ignored. The Death Korps would continue to bombard the hive city with artillery for an additional 5 years. Despite all life within the hive being eliminated after just 3 years, the Death Korps would continue their assault for another 2 before finally withdrawing.
Glory for the first man to die! Charge!
With the Krieg Civil War destroying the world's industrial and manufacturing capabilities, the sole export of any value that Krieg has is that of sheer manpower. In order to pay its tithes, the world will supply upwards of 50 million soldiers per year for the sole purpose of being inducted into the Imperial Guard. To meet such a vast demand for soldiers, the Kriegers have resorted to a number of methods, including the implementation of machines known as vitae wombs. These pieces of technology would allow the Kriegers to effectively mass-produce recruits for the Astra Militarum. While such technology is abhorred by the Adeptus Mechanicus due to how dangerous such wombs could potentially be, their use is sanctioned and tolerated by the Departmentum Unitorum. Any potential recruits that display signs of mutation are swiftly executed. Training for the Death Korps begins at a young age, with such training not only including intense physical trials designed to weed out the weak, but also a series of mental indoctrinations, instilling an unshakable faith in the Emperor within recruits. While this demanding training regimen results in a high number of fatalities, Those recruits that survive are transformed into highly disciplined, self-sufficient soldiers that are driven to insane acts of bravery and heroism purely because it is expected of them. Those recruits that show great aptitude, resourcefulness, and independence will even be trained to be Death Riders. These Death Riders are the Death Korps equivalent to Rough Rider cavalry units, with each Death Rider being instructed in how to ride and fight upon horseback. In addition, instead of being given a name, each recruit is assigned a numerical designation solely for the purpose of making casualties easier for the Administratum to tally. Those recruits that are singled out as potential officers during training must endure additional training courses, and many such future officers are selected from those that have completed Death Rider training. The only officers assigned to Death Korps regiments that are not from the world of Krieg are the members of the Commissariat, as Commissars are always off-worlders to ensure a measure of neutrality. Unlike the Commissars assigned to other Imperial Guard regiments, whose duty is to execute traitors and cowards, the Commissars attached to the Death Korps are instead tasked with acting as tactical advisors, reminding commanders of their objectives and ensuring that Death Korps commanders do not needlessly martyr themselves and their men in their zealous desire to crush the enemy. And that concludes this episode of 40k Lore for Newcomers. If you liked this video, consider supporting us on Patreon for more content. To those who are new to 40k, we hope you learned something. So leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.